Hey all, if you're joining us from YouTube in the future, this is the Cluster Addons call, and it is July 7th. We're just going to chat about some things. It's going to be a smaller meeting, I think, because we are just coming off of the holiday weekend, and happy holidays to all of you. So we just kind of came up with two impromptu agenda items. One is to just quickly discuss some merged work. Justin and I have been working closely with Samtochi, who's our Google Summer of Code participant, and she has some cool things. We'll talk about that. And then we figured that we could use some of the time today to do a little bit of overview over the COPS PR, maybe get into a little bit of code review or discussion. Thanks for joining. Does anybody else have any other agenda items? Feel free to pop them on. As always, if this is the first recording that you've watched, we have our agenda posted in Google Doc that is accessible via the Google group. Go ahead and join that if you'd like. Sweet. So the main one that I wanted to discuss, just think that this is pretty cool. I've got to get the link to it now. Start add-ons. So pull 68 for cluster add-ons. Samtochi opened this patch. Justin reviewed it. I'll go ahead and link this here. If you'd like to take a look, we've discussed this problem on this call before, which is that when you're building operators that are intending to take some ownership over other objects inside of Kubernetes, that the permissions can be wide and sweeping. One of the most naive ways that you can deal with that problem is you can give the operator cluster administrator permissions. But if you want to do more fine-grained access control, then you can generate RBAC roles specific to that operator's use case and the manifest that it needs to apply. And this is finicky and specific to each package that you want to have a channel for installing the manifests. So we looked around and we thought that it would be a solved problem, that you would be able to figure out what the minimum RBAC is for a particular set of objects. And there was no easy way to do that. So Samtochi built this RBAC generator. And yeah, you can go ahead and look at this pull request if you're curious. Okay, so I'll share my screen. It's this patch right here, which is pull request 68. Samtochi built a tool that is, we merged it to tools RBAC gen. And it's just a quick little piece of code that loops through manifests and generates the proper roles necessary to work with those manifests. And there are some things here, like if you have a cluster role inside of the manifest, then you need to generate roles that are a superset of those things. Justin, I can't remember, is that something that's handled by this tool already? Or did we merge it before?
I think it might have made it in. I can't remember. Essentially, this. I think the initial genesis of this was just that when you're creating an add-on, if you want to add those permissions, you have to sort of do it manually and figure them out manually. So this tool started off as here's a manifest. What are the additional permissions I need to apply to that manifest? Like Samtochi basically discovered through trying to build one that was like one of the points of friction of building an add-on operator. And I think what's interesting is then she identified that the requirement for a role, when you want to create a role, you need the superset of that. And then I think what gets really interesting is that we took it from there to this idea of, I guess you haven't talked about it yet, but like the idea of splitting out these permissions into separate files and applying them judiciously, and perhaps in different phases. I can't remember. I think if I recall correctly, RBAC aggregation is in this PR, perhaps behind a flag, but we decided to merge it as it was because we could see that there was going to be a stream of these ideas coming, and we didn't want to like grow this PR infinitely. So we sort of cut it and merged it as at a given point, and I imagine there'll be more PRs in this stream.
Yeah,
of building this tool.
One other comment on here is we did talk about how this RBAC generation, being able to reduce the minimum permissions necessary to work with a particular set of manifests or set of objects. It's not just useful for add-on operators, but potentially for all sorts of automation or least privilege access. So if this is something that you're struggling with or you want to tell people about this, here's an RBAC generator that can produce minimum roles. Pretty cool stuff. The next bit that I just wanted to give Justin a little bit of floor space to talk about.
We should probably
yeah,
I was gonna say, like, Santoshi also did another PR, which was removing our requirement for kubectl to be in the container image by, yeah, you know what?
Yeah, I'll pull that up.
Essentially, cool.
We merged that as well.
Yes, it might have been in
kube builder declarative pattern.
Yes.
This window a little bigger so I can actually read. Builder declarative pattern. Here we are. So that's 101. Adding this to the agenda, which was removal of kubectl exec.
Well, making it not required anymore. There's an alternative. The code is still there if you wanna call into it, but essentially this should
native kubectl exec alternative.
And it's supposed to use the same code as is called by the kubectl CLI when you call apply. So by default client-side apply, and it just removes the requirement to bundle kubectl into that container image, and it makes the image, I think she said it's about half the size, which is great.
Oh wow, it reduces the image by half.
Yes.
I guess operator images. Not binary. And this is something that we mentioned could be a great example of vendoring kubectl apply logic into another code base as an alternative for something like server-side apply, which is currently still behaving differently from kubectl apply. So this does the exact same behavior more or less. We did find one edge case, which is that this currently does not deconstruct kind list, which is pretty esoteric. We ran into that with the WeaveNet CNI add-on. Be applied to do.
I'm now wondering how it's different, given we're calling it to the same code. I'm wondering what we missed. But yes, like there must be like some.
Yeah, it's like there's probably some generator stuff beforehand. Yeah, that's because we didn't grab all of the flag logic and all of that, right? So I imagine that's kind of part of it. But Yeah. And this is a good example of, oh, I already said that. Great ref example for vendoring kubectl apply. Tell people about Linux cluster API. Folks. And yeah, cool stuff. Very cool stuff. I guess I should probably put the agenda in the shared screen as well. And, yeah, those were kind of the big items, right, Justin? As far as like things that we got in.
I believe so. I see Samtoshi has now joined. I don't know if Samtoshi, was there anything else you wanted to call attention to? But I think those were the two biggest things, if I recall.
Yeah, I think you guys talked about most of it. I think other than that, it's just building out various operators for different add-ons. And yeah.
Oh, well,
So
great work coming in.
that's been most of it for the first one.
Awesome. Well, yeah, moving on from that, just wanted to talk a little bit about this first operator integration into COPS. Justin, you said that since you've opened this, you haven't come back to it. That's probably because I have not. Oh yeah, you got a review already from some COPS folks.
Yeah, we got a review. It was actually interesting because I think it's around the different behavioral models of operators versus the way KOps has traditionally done it, where the manifests are pre-rendered and by the client-side tool, and so people concerned around the idea that the server now gets sort of additional permissions. So for some people, that's not what they desire. So some people want the flexibility, the dynamic, like live updating. Some people are more on the side of control and like very methodical.
They don't want to change their operational model of like, wait, we already have COPS as part of our cluster management pipeline, and we only want, you know, that glass to be broken open from a security perspective during that time.
Exactly right. And I think like some of the, like Samtoshi has done great work in the first month already, and but in particular like the RBAC work, like that I think addresses some of these concerns. It opens up the idea that we can deploy operators in different configurations, including like moving the RBAC permissions into that pre-phase. So we can sort of move the biggest concern is of course like this, the super powerful, or one of the concerns is the super powerful operator permissions. So even people that want control want like the supervision and the self-diagnosis and the, you know, self-management. They just don't necessarily want to give all those RBAC permissions. And by more tightly, or by generating the RBAC permissions, we're able to then split them, and we could then run the RBAC or pre-configure the RBAC permissions in the first phase, and then the operator itself might not need as many RBAC permissions. So like I need to update my PR or a follow-on PR, I guess, to one way or the other to try to sort of expose that functionality. But I think it's going to be, very powerful.
Fascinating. So yeah, we're actually talking about envisioning a third model of operations, right? Or like a modified version of the operator where it receives temporal privilege. So currently, like basically, operators have super user for their add-on. We can envision phase or temporal RBAC managed by a tool to reduce operator privileges after apply. And then there's also the one-shot approach, which is, or like the early exit operator running a job.
I mean, I think there are a lot of these configurations that are possible, and I think there's a easy win, which is the thing which is applying, or which is creating the operator. It can create the cluster role and the cluster role binding, which means that the operator itself does not need those permissions. So this is a continuum, and this is a step. It's a small step. It's not as far as one shot, but it does remove a lot of the permissions, not all the permissions, but it removes a lot of the permissions that the operator would otherwise need. So it's a good first step along that continuum that might make some people happy, and also show that we can do this sort of thing.
Great. I'm glad that we've been able to encode some of that discussion in our notes, and hopefully some folks can take interest in that area and add to it as we work through these additional issues. Yeah.
Hi, this is Nick Hale from Red Hat. I was wondering if we ever thought of like a lazy evaluation for RBAC where there is something proxying the API server, taking in requests, and kind of generating a list of failed requests because the RBAC has not been available into something that is like approvable later on. This is just another like shot in the dark. But...
Yeah, we were trying to remember. Like, was it you that someone from Red Hat? I think it was you showed like some docs around this, and it looked really good, but we couldn't find it again. Is that?
Oh, is that this? I think that's more along the lines of like the RBAC generation mixed with something extraneous to the operator or outside the operator that is applying something. This is different in that that was upfront on operator installation, and this is more like you don't explicitly have to write down what you need in your specification, right? Because it's going by API requests. Now, this approach that I'm describing now is kind of like, we can't know if an operator is going to explode and back off, so it might not be great.
We can certainly add that as an additional one. I think I think where it came from was this like when you're building the operator, you have to apply a manifest, and we don't even need, like, we know that that manifest is generally relatively static, and we can generally just scan it and produce the RBAC that is required, including in the various scenarios, like where objects exist already, which is nice, I think. So I think I don't think we're precluding some form of dynamic discovery through the audit log or like a proxy or kind or something, but I think there's the easier or more this static analysis has a place, I think, as well.
Yes,
yeah,
I think it's not fundamentally different from what Nick is suggesting. He was like just pointing out that like you could use an API server proxy to catch these things at runtime and return errors. That interface ultimately, like the operator would be using a Kubernetes client, so that proxy would need to talk like a Kubernetes API server, which means that the operator's errors would feel kind of opaque. But to Justin's point, I think that there's like a lot of opportunity here for the operator to have something like a pre-flight check, which we already have in the declarative pattern, that simply can know, what its RBAC rules are, and report that it's not compliant or that's not going to be able to apply these things. Or it could even be at runtime, right? Like you can determine at runtime, hey, I didn't have the permission to apply these rules. I need this list of things. And an example of where you could put that information might be on the custom resource that you're trying to reconcile, or in a config map for the operator that could be applied by a cluster administrator later and converted to a role. And really, really interesting idea that I think would make the UX of like administering these operators much easier, and potentially even allow for some machine run mechanisms, right, to automate the management of these RBAC rules. Like if you're, I really like it, Nick. You were talking about how there was a little bit of inspiration from like the Android user experience of permissions, right?
For the thing that Justin brought up, yes.
Yeah. What is that thing called? We could not remember.
I'll try to. I'll go get the doc and post it here later. But
yeah, we tried sifting through the docs for things like permissions and capabilities and Android, and we could not find it for like through our reading notes and some hilarious Google searches. So would really,
yeah, I'll put it there.
It'd be great to have a link here.
Yeah, we were hanging it off something called the install API, which in itself is like in flux right now because we're going through like a lot of just questioning designs and design turn internally on OLM's team. So we're trying to make that process less opaque too. But I'll find it and I will post it here. But with respect to lazily evaluating the stuff, what you and Justin said are totally totally fair. Yeah, I just wanted to throw the idea out there. I didn't know if anybody said it before.
No, I think that this is super powerful, right? Because in the fork workflow, right? Like say a user wants to add a Prometheus service operator, or sorry, a Prometheus service monitor, like an object that they want to like add it to the manifest list or something. You could argue that maybe that's not the right thing to do, but a user wants to fork their operator manifests and then point the operator to a new bundle, then now it's not going to have RBAC, right? So if you have some sort of lazy workflow, right, where you don't just get errors, right? There's actually an action that can be taken by the administrator beyond that point to, just copy and paste this thing, which is basically the Kubernetes YAML equivalent of pressing OK on a permission dialog on a phone or something. Then that would be a really powerful kind of workflow.
Yeah, this is up the alley of someone's RBAC generator, and very, I think, closely aligned to getting a diff of the RBAC that is available versus what you require, and then generating new roles and role bindings to fill that gap.
Yeah, and this idea of composing role bindings together is not something that we see a lot with the third-party style of add-on. I think a lot of people are just putting all of their things into one big cluster role binding, or cluster role and cluster role binding. So we did comment that we'd like to see a wider use of multiple role bindings for particular service account to get their namespace and cluster level permissions accurate. Great. Thanks for contributing that. If you end up stumbling on the install API docs, please do post them here. and appreciate it.
Will do. Thanks.
Great. Well, great quick meeting today. It's awesome to hear from everyone. Assuming that we have nothing else that we want to discuss, I think it's cool to call this good. And we'll reconvene on some of these topics in 2 weeks or in the Slack channel in the meantime. Thanks, everyone.